Before we start, if you're enjoying this kind of content, don't forget to leave a like. That really helps the channel. Now let's dive into one of the most incredible survival stories ever recorded. In the winter of 2019, something happened in the Rocky Mountains that would shake the entire survival community. A man named Marcus Webb was left behind during one of the worst blizzards ever recorded, temperatures dropping to -62 degrees Celsius. Everyone believed he would be dead within days, but 120 days later, when rescue teams finally reached his location, they discovered something that defied all logic: a fully functional shelter built from stone, frozen wood, and salvaged metal. This is his story. Marcus Webb was a 47-year-old geologist who had spent his entire life studying mountain terrain. On December 15, 2019, he was part of a research expedition in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, investigating mineral deposits in one of the most remote regions of North America. The team consisted of 5 people: Marcus, 2 junior researchers, a guide named Thomas, and a supply coordinator named Elena. The weather forecast predicted a moderate snowstorm, nothing they hadn't handled before. But nature had other plans. By noon, the wind speeds exceeded 120 kilometers per hour. The visibility dropped to nearly zero. What started as a manageable situation rapidly spiraled into a life-threatening emergency. The team decided to retreat to their base camp, approximately 8 kilometers away. They were roped together, moving carefully through the whiteout conditions. Marcus was positioned third in the line. Thomas led from the front, followed by Elena, then Marcus, with the 2 junior researchers trailing behind. The plan was simple: follow the marked trail, reach the camp, wait out the storm. But at kilometer 5, disaster struck. A sudden gust of wind, stronger than anything they'd experienced, knocked Elena sideways. She collided with Marcus, who lost his footing on a hidden ice patch. Both of them tumbled down an embankment, separated from the rope. Thomas heard the commotion but couldn't see anything through the blinding snow. The junior researchers, panicked and disoriented, couldn't help. Within seconds, Marcus and Elena were out of sight, swallowed by the white void. Elena, thankfully, managed to grab a rocky outcrop and pull herself back up the slope. She was injured, but alive. She made it back to the group, who immediately attempted a rescue. But the conditions were deteriorating rapidly. Visibility was now 0. Temperatures were dropping. After 30 minutes of searching and calling Marcus's name with no response, Thomas made the hardest decision of his life. They had to retreat to base camp and wait for the storm to pass. Marcus, however, was nowhere to be found. He had landed in a narrow ravine, partially cushioned by snow. When he regained consciousness, he was alone. His radio was broken. His left leg was injured, not broken, but badly sprained. The storm raged above him with apocalyptic fury. The temperature was dropping by the minute. His emergency beacon wasn't transmitting. Marcus realized the truth. No one was coming today. He had to survive the night. If you're enjoying this story so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This helps a lot. In that first moment, fear threatened to overwhelm him. Hypothermia sets in within minutes at these temperatures. He had no shelter, no fire-starting materials that would work in these conditions, and no way to signal for help. His colleagues probably thought he was dead already. But Marcus Webb was not the kind of man who accepted defeat easily. His mind, trained through decades of mountain research, shifted into survival mode. He assessed his situation methodically. He was in a ravine, which meant some protection from the wind. He had clothing, heavy winter gear rated for extreme cold. He had a knife, a lighter, and a small emergency kit on his belt. He had a chance. That first night, Marcus wedged himself between 2 rock formations, using his body heat and the insulating properties of the snow around him. He didn't sleep. He couldn't risk losing consciousness. Instead, he moved his limbs constantly, preventing the onset of hypothermia. He recited facts about mineral composition, mountain geology, anything to keep his mind active and focused. The storm raged for 14 hours. When dawn broke, or what passed for dawn in the perpetual grey of the blizzard, Marcus took inventory. His leg was still painful but functional. His fingers were numb but not frostbitten. He was alive, and he understood something profound. Survival wasn't about luck. It was about decision-making, resourcefulness, and the absolute refusal to surrender to circumstances. He began to explore the ravine, moving carefully despite his injured leg. That's when he found it, an old mining tunnel, half buried in snow and rock, dating back to the 1890s. It was partially collapsed, but the entrance was accessible. Inside, protected from the elements, he found something invaluable: old wooden beams, rusted metal tools, and most importantly, shelter from the wind. Marcus had found his base. He spent the entire second day clearing the entrance, stabilizing the structure, and preparing the interior. By nightfall, he had a shelter that could save his life. It wasn't comfortable, but it was infinitely better than the open ravine. As he sat inside that tunnel, listening to the storm howl outside, Marcus realized that his real struggle was just beginning. Winter was at its peak. The rescue teams wouldn't search in these conditions. He was completely, utterly alone, 120 kilometers from the nearest town, in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. He had no food, minimal supplies, an injured leg, and temperatures that would kill an unprepared human in hours. But Marcus Webb possessed something that statistics and probabilities couldn't measure: an unbreakable will to survive. This was day 1 of 120. Welcome back to the story of Marcus Webb. If you haven't watched the first chapter yet, go back and watch it. You'll understand why what happens next is so incredible. Now let's continue. Days 3 through 7 were critical. Marcus's sprained leg was improving, but movement remained painful. The mining tunnel became his world. He spent his first week securing the shelter, making it weatherproof and insulating. He used old canvas from abandoned mining equipment, layered it with dried grass he found in protected areas near the tunnel entrance, and created a basic insulation system against the outer walls. The tunnel itself was approximately 30 meters deep. The entrance was narrow, which was actually beneficial. It limited air infiltration and made heating more efficient. Marcus identified a section about 10 meters inside as his main living area. He gathered stones and created a crude fireplace, using an old metal bucket as a primitive stove. The ventilation issue was serious. A fire without proper airflow could kill him with carbon monoxide poisoning. He spent 2 full days creating a chimney system using stacked stones and a metal pipe he discovered deeper in the tunnel. By day 10, he had managed to start a fire using dry wood from the tunnel's interior beams and kindling gathered from dead tree branches near the entrance. The heat was transformative. Not only did it provide warmth, but it gave him something psychological, a sense of control, of human triumph over the environment. But warmth alone wouldn't sustain him. He needed food. Marcus had no hunting equipment, no fishing gear, no agricultural resources. The landscape was locked in deep winter, buried under meters of snow. Most animals had either migrated or gone into hibernation. Finding food seemed nearly impossible. On day 12, desperation drove him to action. He fashioned a crude trap from wire he found in the tunnel and branches from dead trees. He set it near the entrance, baiting it with nothing. He literally had nothing to bait it with. That night, he caught nothing. The next night, nothing. For 5 days straight, his trap remained empty, but Marcus refused to accept starvation as his fate. He began exploring deeper into the mountain. Beyond the mining tunnel, he discovered an underground stream, partially frozen, but still flowing. More importantly, he found the stream's cavern system extended deeper into the mountain. And in those caverns, protected from the surface cold, life still existed. He found insects, larvae and pupae, dormant in the rock crevices. They were protein, not appetizing, but alive. He found mushrooms growing on decaying wood in the deeper cavern sections. He found roots of plants that had penetrated deep into the earth seeking water. He found lichen on cave walls, edible, though nearly tasteless. Leave your comment about what you're thinking of this story so far. For the first time in 2 weeks, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just surviving in a shelter. He was learning to live within this hostile ecosystem. He was adapting, evolving, becoming part of the mountain's harsh reality. By day 20, he had established a routine. Mornings were spent maintaining the fire and the shelter. Midday was dedicated to foraging in the deeper caverns. Afternoons involved collecting firewood from dead trees accessible near the entrance. Evenings were spent around the fire, warming his body, rationing his meager food, and keeping his mind active through mental exercises, reciting scientific literature, doing mathematical calculations, planning his next day. The injury to his leg improved steadily. By day 25, he could walk without significant pain. This opened new possibilities. He could venture farther from the tunnel, exploring the immediate surroundings during daylight hours. One crucial discovery came on day 28, a cache of old mining supplies buried in a secondary tunnel. Inside were cotton cloth, wooden handles, metal tools, and most valuable of all, several containers of preserved lard and dried meat. The food was decades old, but it was edible. Marcus consumed the preserved meat slowly, rationing it carefully. If he had discovered this cache earlier, it would have transformed his situation immediately. Now it served as both nourishment and psychological reassurance. He also found old maps of the mining operation, detailed charts showing tunnel systems, water sources, and mineral deposits. For a geologist, this was invaluable. Marcus studied these maps obsessively, understanding the mountain's internal structure, identifying the safest routes through the caverns, and locating potential resources he hadn't yet discovered. By day 30, Marcus had transformed the mining tunnel into something resembling a home. He had organized sections, a sleeping area with insulation and old canvas bedding, a cooking and fire area with proper ventilation, a storage area for food and supplies, and a workspace where he maintained his tools and planned his daily activities. The psychological toll, however, was significant. Solitude at this level tested the human mind. Marcus wasn't just fighting physical survival. He was fighting the crushing loneliness of being completely, absolutely alone in a frozen landscape where no human voice would reach him. He developed coping mechanisms. He spoke aloud constantly, narrating his actions, describing the mountain's geology, reciting poetry and literature from memory. He created a calendar system, scratching marks into the stone wall to count the days. He maintained a written journal using charcoal on cloth, recording his observations, his strategies, his emotional state. On day 35, Marcus stood at the entrance of his tunnel home, looking out at the snow-covered landscape bathed in pale sunlight. He realized something profound. He was no longer in immediate danger. He had food, shelter, warmth, and water. He had time. The question was no longer, will I survive the next day, but rather, can I maintain this for as long as it takes for rescue to find me? This mental shift was transformative. Marcus moved from survival mode, reactive, desperate, focused on immediate threats, to sustainability mode, strategic, methodical, focused on long-term endurance. He had survived the first month. 120 days lay ahead of him. Marcus Webb was beginning to understand what it truly meant to be alone in the mountains, and more importantly, he was beginning to realize that he might actually live through this. We're back with Marcus Webb's incredible survival story. If you're enjoying this content as much as we are telling it, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us bring you more stories like this. Now, let's see how Marcus handles the deepest, darkest part of winter. January arrived with a ferocity that tested every aspect of Marcus's survival strategy. The temperature dropped even further, reaching -55 to -60 degrees Celsius on the worst days. The wind that howled across the mountains was so powerful that standing in the open became genuinely dangerous. Exposed skin would freeze in minutes. Marcus had now been alone for 47 days. The initial shock of abandonment had faded, replaced by a different kind of challenge. The monotony of isolation and the constant grinding effort required to maintain life in extreme conditions. His fire became his obsession. Keeping it alive was essential, not just for warmth, but for morale. On the worst days, when the temperature inside the tunnel dropped to near freezing despite his efforts, the fire was the difference between hypothermia and survival. Marcus collected firewood compulsively, storing massive quantities in the entrance chamber. He learned to read the wood's moisture content by weight and sound, selecting only the driest pieces for maximum heat. The food situation had stabilized but remained precarious. His forage diet, insects, mushrooms, lichen, roots, and the occasional bird he managed to trap, provided roughly 800 to 1,000 calories per day. This was below the recommended intake, but it was sustainable. Marcus's body adapted, his metabolism slowing, his movements becoming more efficient. He lost weight steadily, but not catastrophically. His heavy winter clothing, now layered with furs from trapped animals, kept him functional despite the extreme cold. But physical survival is only half the battle. The human mind requires stimulation, purpose, and connection. Marcus faced a new enemy: psychological deterioration. In early January, he began experiencing what he later described as tunnel vision episodes, moments where he would lose track of time, finding hours had passed without memory of their passage. He had intense dreams when he slept, surreal and often disturbing. He sometimes talked to himself in different voices, creating imaginary conversations with colleagues, family members, and even fictional characters. These weren't signs of madness. They were normal psychological responses to extreme isolation. Marcus was aware of what was happening and worked methodically to combat it. He established strict mental routines. Every morning he would solve complex mathematical problems in his head. He would recite literature, philosophy, scientific papers from memory. He maintained his journal, forcing himself to write detailed entries about his observations, his emotions, his plans. Most importantly, he gave himself projects beyond mere survival. On day 53, Marcus began what he called the Mapping Project. Using charcoal and cloth, he created detailed maps of the tunnel system, marking water sources, food resources, dangerous areas with unstable rock, and potential shelter locations. This project gave him purpose. It occupied his mind during the long, dark afternoons. And practically speaking, it created backup knowledge should something happen to him in one tunnel system. He would know how to navigate to alternatives. By mid-January, Marcus had also established what he called the expansion phase. The original mining tunnel was secure and relatively comfortable, but he began cautiously exploring and improving adjacent tunnel systems. He discovered a second tunnel with a natural opening that provided better ventilation for his fire. He found a third tunnel with a natural water source, an underground spring that never froze due to geothermal heat from deeper in the mountain. This discovery was transformative. Fresh, clean water had previously required melting snow, which consumed massive quantities of fuel. Now, he had a reliable water source that required no energy expenditure. He built a water collection system using old mining containers, creating a supply he could access daily. By day 65, Marcus's situation had improved significantly from a practical standpoint. He had multiple shelter options, reliable food sources through his foraging and trapping, consistent fresh water, and a sophisticated fire management system. By the standards of survival, he was becoming genuinely comfortable. But comfort brought new challenges. With immediate physical threats reduced, Marcus's mind turned inward. The reality of his situation became clearer and more psychologically crushing. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. There was no guarantee rescue was coming. The search and rescue teams might have given up. His colleagues might not even know where to look. Winter in the mountains is brutal and unforgiving. Rescue operations often become recovery operations. On day 70, Marcus experienced what he described in his journal as his darkest day. He sat in the tunnel, staring at the fire, and for the first time allowed himself to consider that he might never be rescued, that he might spend the rest of his life in this mountain, alone, subsisting on insects and trapped animals with no human contact until death finally claimed him. The despair was overwhelming. For hours, he sat motionless, the fire burning low, his mind spiraling into darkness. But something remarkable happened. As the fire died and the temperature began to drop, his survival instinct reasserted itself. He stood up, he added wood to the fire, he warmed his hands, he ate a meal of roasted insects and mushrooms. He wrote in his journal, "Despair is a luxury I cannot afford. I survive. This is what I do. I survive." This moment marked a turning point. Marcus had confronted the possibility of his own death and chosen instead to commit fully to life. The remaining 50 days of winter were no longer about desperate survival. They were about methodical, strategic endurance. He began what he called his spring project, preparing for the moment when rescue might become possible. He worked on creating a signal fire area near the tunnel entrance, clearing snow and preparing materials that could be ignited rapidly if he heard search helicopters. He created markers visible from above, using dark stones arranged in patterns that would stand out against white snow. He fashioned a whistle from a deer's leg bone, practicing it daily so his signal would be as loud and clear as possible. He was no longer just surviving, he was actively preparing for rescue. If you're loving this story, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Let's keep this momentum going. By day 90, Marcus Webb had been alone in the mountains for 3 months. He had transformed from a desperate man clinging to survival into something more complex. A human being who had adapted to an impossible situation, who had confronted psychological despair and emerged stronger, who was not just surviving, but living with purpose and hope. His body was thin but functional, his mind was sharp and active, his shelter was secure and comfortable. And most importantly, he was alive, genuinely, fully alive, in a way that only those who have faced death can truly understand. Welcome back to Marcus Webb's journey. We're now in the 4th chapter of this incredible survival story. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. As February progressed, Marcus faced a new challenge. The monotony of routine was affecting his physical health. He had sufficient food, adequate shelter, and reliable water, but his body was beginning to show signs of nutritional deficiency. His nails became brittle. His gums started bleeding slightly when he chewed. His energy levels fluctuated unpredictably. These were symptoms of scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, a condition that had plagued sailors and explorers for centuries. Marcus recognized the symptoms from his geological research. He had read historical accounts of mining expeditions that failed not from hunger, but from nutritional collapse. He needed to find sources of vitamin C. In the deep caverns, where geothermal heat kept conditions slightly warmer, Marcus discovered something remarkable. A fungus that grew on decaying wood, rich in nutrients his body desperately needed. He also found, in a protected alcove near the warm spring, the remnants of an old mining camp's vegetable storage. The vegetables had long since decomposed, but the soil where they had been stored was rich in mineral content and organic matter. Marcus realized that if vegetables had been grown here once, perhaps he could cultivate something. This realization sparked what became his most ambitious project: creating a growing space for food in the geothermally heated cavern. Using materials from the old mining camp, Marcus constructed a basic growing bed from wood and canvas, filling it with soil he carried from various locations in the caverns. He had no seeds, but he had something almost as valuable: knowledge. He knew that potatoes could be regrown from small sections of existing potatoes. He began preserving tiny portions of any root vegetables he found, attempting to cultivate them in his makeshift garden. The results were modest, extremely modest. But by day 105, he had managed to grow 3 small potato shoots. They were stunted and pale, lacking sunlight, but they were alive. They represented hope. They represented the possibility of expanding his food sources beyond what he could hunt and gather. This project consumed his attention for weeks. He maintained detailed records of temperature, soil moisture, and growth rates. He experimented with different locations in the caverns, trying to optimize heat and humidity. He became, in essence, a geothermal gardener in an underground cave system. Beyond his agricultural experiments, Marcus was also becoming an engineer and an architect. He developed increasingly sophisticated systems for living in the tunnel. He created a water filtration system using sand and gravel. He designed a more efficient fire system using a metal chimney he constructed from salvaged mining materials. He built shelving from wooden beams, organized in a way that maximized space and accessibility. Most impressively, he created what he called his signal beacon. Using materials from the mining camp, he constructed a metal structure above the tunnel entrance that could hold a large fire. On clear days, when he heard distant sounds that might be helicopters, he could light this beacon and create a visible smoke signal from miles away. Every aspect of the tunnel became optimized. Every material that could be salvaged was salvaged. Every system was refined and improved. Marcus was no longer just surviving. He was creating, building, demonstrating the remarkable capacity of human ingenuity when faced with adversity. But Marcus also understood something crucial. Staying physically and mentally healthy required more than projects and routines. It required meaning and connection. On day 110, he began what would become his most important work: writing. He used charcoal and cloth to begin documenting his entire experience in detail. He wrote about the day of the accident, the first desperate night in the ravine, the discovery of the mining tunnel, the early days of learning to survive. He wrote about his techniques for food gathering and shelter building. He wrote about his psychological struggles and how he had overcome them. He wrote about his family, his ex-wife, his daughter in college, his parents, and the guilt he felt for leaving them without knowing whether he was alive or dead. This writing became therapeutic. It gave him a way to process his experience, to externalize his emotions, and to create something that might, if he was eventually rescued, tell the world his story. By day 115, Marcus had filled dozens of cloth pages with charcoal writings. He organized them carefully, storing them in a dry section of the tunnel. If he didn't survive, these writings would be a record of his attempt. If he did survive, they would become testimony to human resilience. February turned into early March. The days were becoming slightly longer, the sun slightly stronger, though the temperature remained brutally cold. Marcus had now been alone for almost 4 months. His physical state was stabilized, thin but functioning. His mental state was surprisingly good, considering the isolation. He had structured his time, created purpose through projects and routines, and maintained hope through actively preparing for rescue. On day 120, Marcus stood at the tunnel entrance and did something he had not done in months. He allowed himself to smile. Looking at his signal beacon, his organized shelter, his cultivated plants in the deep caverns, his stored food and maintained fire, he recognized what he had accomplished. He had not merely survived, he had thrived. He had transformed a desperate situation into a functioning life. He had proven that human beings, when facing impossible odds, possess reserves of strength, creativity, and determination that defy statistical probability. The real question now was not whether he would survive. That seemed increasingly likely. The question was whether rescue would find him, and if so, whether the world would understand what he had accomplished in this frozen wilderness. Marcus had given up thinking about rescue as an external salvation. He had become his own rescuer, his own creator, his own salvation. Whatever came next, he had already won the most important battle, the battle against despair, against surrender, against the temptation to give up. We're entering the final stretch of Marcus Webb's incredible journey. If this story has moved you as much as it has moved us, please leave a comment below. I'd love to know what you're thinking. Let's continue with Chapter 5. March brought subtle but significant changes to the mountain. The daylight hours extended noticeably. The temperature, while still brutally cold, fluctuated less violently. Snow began to settle and compress rather than accumulate as heavily. These small changes were profound for Marcus because they signaled something crucial: the end of the deepest winter, the beginning of the season when rescue might actually be possible. But this hope brought its own challenges. For months, Marcus had operated under the assumption that rescue was unlikely. This mindset had a perverse psychological benefit. It removed the anxiety of waiting. If rescue wasn't coming, there was no point in hoping for it. His energy went into survival, not into watching the sky for helicopters that would never arrive. Now, with signs that spring was approaching, hope rushed back, and with it came a new corrosive form of suffering: waiting. By day 135, Marcus found himself listening obsessively for helicopter sounds. Every wind gust made him wonder if it was the rotor blades of a rescue aircraft. Every strange sound in the mountains made his heart leap with possibility. This constant vigilance was emotionally exhausting in a way that the straightforward challenges of survival had not been. On day 140, he experienced what he would later describe as his second psychological crisis. Different from the despair of January, but equally dangerous. He became convinced that rescue would not come, that it couldn't come, that his colleagues had given up searching, that his family had accepted him as dead, that he would live out his remaining years in this tunnel, gradually becoming acclimated to isolation, eventually losing the human skills and memories that defined him as Marcus Webb. This thought spiral was dangerous because it led to a second question. If rescue wasn't coming, did survival have meaning? If no one would ever know what he had accomplished here, why accomplish anything? For 3 days, Marcus abandoned his projects. He sat by the fire and stared into the flames. He stopped maintaining his journal. He let the signal beacon materials sit idle. He ate mechanically, but without interest. He was, in the truest sense, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. But on day 143, something unexpected happened. As Marcus sat in the darkness of the cavern, away from the fire, he heard a sound that made his entire body go rigid. The distant, unmistakable sound of a helicopter. His hands were shaking as he scrambled toward the tunnel entrance. The helicopter was far away, perhaps miles, moving in a direction away from his location. But it was real. It was there. Rescue teams were searching. Marcus ran to his signal beacon. His hands were clumsy with desperation as he gathered kindling, arranged it carefully, and struck his lighter. The fire caught. Smoke began rising, dark and visible against the early afternoon sky. Marcus grabbed the whistle he had fashioned from the deer bone and blew it repeatedly, a shrill cry into the wilderness. The helicopter didn't come back, but it had been there. That night Marcus couldn't sleep. He was wired with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The fact that a helicopter had been searching meant rescue teams were actively looking. It meant his family hadn't given up. It meant there was a genuine possibility of being found. From that moment on, Marcus's entire focus shifted. He maintained the signal beacon with obsessive attention. Every day he checked it, arranged materials for rapid fire lighting, tested his whistle. He began climbing to higher elevations on clear days, looking for aircraft, listening for them. He set up a system of markers visible from above, large stones arranged in patterns that spelled out SOS. March continued, and the weather gradually improved. By day 150, the temperature was regularly rising above -40 degrees Celsius during the day. The snow began to melt slightly in afternoon sun. And Marcus began to see something he hadn't witnessed in months: animal tracks in the snow. Birds began returning to the mountains. Life was awakening. By day 155, Marcus stood at a crossroads. He had survived 4 months in extreme conditions. His body was functioning, though thin. His mind was sharp, though tested. His shelter was sophisticated and functional. He had food sources, water, and warmth. But the waiting was becoming unbearable. He had prepared himself for either outcome, rescue or long-term solitude. But this middle ground, the possibility of rescue without the certainty, was psychologically harder than either extreme. He found himself making deals with fate, with God, with the universe. Just one more week, he would think. If I make it one more week, I'll be found. On day 160, Marcus experienced something profound while standing at the tunnel entrance. He realized that he had changed. The man who had fallen into the ravine on December 15th was not the same person standing here now. He had been transformed by the mountains, by survival, by isolation, and by his own fierce determination to live. The old Marcus Webb, the geologist, the researcher, the urban professional, felt like a person he had once been. The new Marcus Webb was something different, a creature of the mountains, adapted to extremes, hardened by challenge, stripped down to essential truths about existence. He wondered, standing in the cool March air with the smell of melting snow and the sound of water running from warming ice, whether rescue would feel like a blessing or like an interruption, whether returning to civilization would feel like freedom or exile. By day 165, the snowpack around the mountains was noticeably reduced. It would soon be late spring, early summer. Rescue operations would be in full swing. The season of searching was officially here. Marcus waited. He maintained his signal beacon. He listened for helicopters. He wrote in his journal about his thoughts and feelings. He cared for his plants in the geothermal cavern. He kept his fire burning bright, a beacon of human presence in the wilderness. He had survived 4 months alone. Days 165 to 120 meant that rescue could come any day now. Or it might not come at all. All Marcus could do was continue to survive, continue to live, continue to maintain hope while remaining prepared for any outcome. We've reached the final chapter of Marcus Webb's incredible 120-day survival journey. This is where everything that he fought for, every day, every hardship, every moment of doubt, comes to its culmination. Before we begin, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. And if this story has moved you, leave a comment below telling me what you thought. Now let's see how Marcus's incredible journey ends. Day 184 arrived like any other day in the mountains. Marcus had fallen into a routine so ingrained that each morning felt like a repetition of the last. He woke before dawn, added wood to his fire, checked the signal beacon for any damage or deterioration, collected fresh water from the underground spring, and prepared his meager breakfast of foraged food and preserved meat. The weather was warmer now, late April in the mountains. The snow had receded significantly, revealing dark earth and the brown skeletal remains of vegetation. The days were noticeably longer, and the sunlight, while still lacking the full warmth of summer, no longer felt like a distant memory. Marcus had almost stopped actively waiting for rescue. The psychological toll of hope, followed by disappointment, had worn him down. He had developed a kind of acceptance, a recognition that he might live the rest of his life in these mountains. It wasn't a despairing acceptance, but rather a pragmatic one. He had built a life here. He could continue to build on it. But on this particular morning, something unusual happened. As Marcus was preparing water from the spring, he heard a sound that made him freeze. It wasn't a helicopter. It was something even more distinctive, the distant but unmistakable sound of a human voice. For a moment, Marcus couldn't process what he was hearing. Human voices, words, multiple voices, echoing slightly as they carried through the mountains. His hands were shaking as he moved toward the tunnel entrance. His voice, when he tried to speak, was hoarse and cracked. He hadn't used it in months except for his private monologues. He managed to produce a shout, though it was weak, barely audible even to himself. The voices didn't respond. They were moving away. Marcus grabbed the whistle he had fashioned and blew it with all his strength. The shrill sound cut through the mountain air, desperate and urgent. He blew it again and again. The voices stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then from approximately 200 meters downslope, a shout, "Did you hear that?" Marcus responded by blowing the whistle 3 more times in rapid succession. A universal distress signal. More shouting. The sound of equipment being moved. The sound of people running, their footsteps crunching through the remaining patches of snow and on rocky terrain. Marcus emerged from the tunnel entrance. He was thin, perhaps 30 kilograms lighter than when he had arrived. His skin was weathered, darkened by months of exposure to sun, reflecting off snow. His hair and beard were long and unkempt. He was wearing layered clothing made from various materials, mining cloth, animal furs, canvas strips bound together for warmth. He looked like a creature from another world. The rescue team appeared around a ridge, 4 people in search and rescue uniforms, equipped with radios, emergency supplies, and weapons, bare deterrents. When they saw Marcus, all of them stopped simultaneously. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody. The rescue team was staring at what appeared to be a wild man, standing in front of a mine shaft in the middle of nowhere, in the San Juan Mountains, where an extensive search had been conducted 4 months earlier. "Marcus Webb?" one of the rescuers asked, uncertainty evident in his voice. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. He tried again. "Yes, I'm Marcus Webb." The rescue team rushed forward. The next minutes were a blur of activity, vital signs being checked, medical questions being asked, water and food being offered. Marcus was in shock. The reality of rescue was surreal, overwhelming. After 184 days of solitude, suddenly he was surrounded by human contact, human voices, human concern. The rescue team's leader, a woman named Sarah, asked repeatedly, "Are you injured? Are you in pain? What do you need?" Marcus struggled to articulate his condition. He was physically weak, but surprisingly healthy for someone who had been alone for 6 months. He had no serious injuries, no signs of severe malnutrition, no apparent frostbite or infection. The medical assessment, conducted right there in the wilderness, suggested he was in better condition than expected. "How did you survive?" Sarah asked, amazement evident in her voice. Marcus gestured toward the tunnel. "I found shelter. An old mining tunnel. I made fire. I found water. I found food." His voice was still weak, but the words came more easily as he spoke. "I've been organizing everything. I have supplies. I have records of what I've done." The rescue team was stunned. They helped Marcus walk back to the tunnel entrance. When they saw what he had created, the sophisticated shelter system, the fire management setup, the careful organization of supplies, the signal beacon he had constructed, the evidence of months of methodical survival, they understood immediately that they weren't dealing with someone who had merely stumbled through luck. Over the next hours, as Marcus was being prepared for evacuation by helicopter, He shared his story. The rescue team recorded his accounts, documented his shelter, photographed the tunnel system. They found his journal, the cloth pages he had filled with charcoal writing, meticulously organized and stored. When they examined his notes, they found not just a record of survival, but a detailed scientific analysis of the mountain terrain, the food sources he had discovered, the weather patterns he had observed, and the engineering solutions he had implemented. The helicopter arrived in early afternoon. Marcus was secured on a stretcher, though he protested that he could walk. "I've been walking for months," he insisted, but protocol required transport. As the helicopter lifted off, Marcus looked down at the mountains below. His tunnel, his shelter, his signal beacon, all of it visible for a moment before the aircraft's angle changed and the landscape swept beneath them. He was rescued. The nightmare was over. But as Marcus sat in the helicopter, medics checking his vital signs, he felt something unexpected, a profound ambivalence. Yes, he wanted to go home. Yes, he wanted to see his family, to reconnect with civilization, to sleep in a bed and eat unrationed food. But he also felt a strange pull toward the mountains below. The mountains had tested him, and he had met that test. The mountains had demanded everything of him, and he had survived. In the brutal simplicity of the wilderness, Marcus had found something that urban life had never provided: a clear sense of purpose, a direct connection between action and consequence, and the profound satisfaction of overcoming impossible odds. The rescue of Marcus Webb became national news. Media outlets described it as miraculous, as impossible, as defying all odds. When he was taken to the hospital in Boulder, Colorado, crowds of reporters gathered. His colleagues came to visit. His family, his ex-wife, his daughter, his parents, were reunited with him, tears streaming down their faces. But Marcus, lying in the hospital bed, felt disconnected from the celebrations and amazement. The doctor informed him that he was in remarkable health. No frostbite, no scurvy, despite his rationed diet, no serious injuries beyond some weakness from months of inadequate food intake. "What you've accomplished is extraordinary," the doctor said. "Most people in your situation would have perished within weeks." Marcus nodded, but said nothing. He knew the truth. He had survived not through luck, not through miracle, but through conscious choice. Every day, he had chosen to continue living. Every obstacle had been met with problem-solving. Every moment of despair had been countered with determination. 3 weeks after his rescue, once Marcus had recovered enough strength and the medical evaluation was complete, he granted a single interview. In that interview, when asked what he wanted people to know about his experience, he said something that would be quoted in countless articles and documentaries. "Survival is not supernatural. It's not magical. It's not a miracle. It's a choice. Every single day I chose to survive. I chose to problem solve. I chose to not give up." That's all survival really is. The continuous, exhausting choice to keep going when everything in your circumstances suggests you should stop. Months later, Marcus returned to the San Juan Mountains with a film crew. He wanted to document his shelter, to show the world how he had lived, to explain the techniques he had used. The mining tunnel was exactly as he had left it: the fire pit, the carefully organized supplies, the signal beacon. The geothermal cavern, where he had attempted to grow food, showed his experimental beds, now overgrown but still present. Seeing his shelter again brought complicated emotions. Marcus realized that he had loved the mountains during his survival in ways he had never anticipated. The isolation had been necessary for him to understand something fundamental about existence, that human beings are far more capable than they typically recognize. That resourcefulness, determination, and clear thinking can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. That meaning comes not from comfort, but from purposeful struggle. 184 days alone in the mountains had transformed Marcus Webb from a geologist into something more complex, a survivor, a testament to human resilience and a man who understood the thin line between despair and triumph. In the years following his rescue, Marcus wrote a book about his experience. He became a speaker on survival psychology and human resilience. He continued his geological research, now with a deeper understanding of the mountains he studied, but he never forgot the tunnel. He never forgot the fire that had kept him alive. He never forgot the choice made each day to continue living. Thank you for watching the complete story of Marcus Webb's incredible 120-day survival in the frozen mountains. If you loved this story as much as we did, please leave a comment below telling me what you thought, which part moved you the most. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next incredible story we bring you. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and would love to know what you're feeling after hearing Marcus's journey. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.